Imagine drowning in syrup. Not water, syrup. A thick, sticky wave taller than a two-story building, moving faster than a horse can run, trapping you in its suffocating sweetness as you struggle for air that won't come. On January 15th, 1919, this nightmare became reality for the people of Boston's North End. A massive storage tank burst open, releasing over 2 million gallons of molasses in a devastating tsunami that would kill 21 people and injure 150 more. This is the story of the day Boston drowned in dessert. Boston's North End in 1919 was a densely packed immigrant neighborhood, predominantly Italian, where tenement buildings stood shoulder to shoulder with industrial facilities. On Commercial Street, looming over the crowded residential area, stood a massive steel tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company. This wasn't just any tank. It was 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, painted brown to camouflage the rust that was already spreading across its hastily constructed walls. Inside, it held 2.3 million gallons of crude molasses, recently shipped from Cuba and waiting to be distilled into industrial alcohol and rum. The tank had been built quickly in 1915, during World War I, when demand for industrial alcohol skyrocketed. It was needed for manufacturing munitions, and speed took priority over safety. The construction was rushed, the design was flawed, and no architect ever approved the plans. The rivets were substandard, the steel plates were too thin, and critically, the tank was never properly tested for leaks or structural integrity. Local residents had complained for years that the tank leaked so badly they would collect the dripping molasses in pans to take home. Children would bring cups to gather the free sweetener. The company's response was to paint the tank brown so the leaks wouldn't be visible. This wasn't safety engineering. This was corporate negligence waiting for the perfect moment to kill. January 15th, 1919, started as an unusually warm day for Boston winter. Temperatures had risen from 2 degrees Fahrenheit to 40 degrees almost overnight. The tank, filled to near capacity just 2 days earlier, sat baking in the unexpected warmth. Inside, a chemical reaction was occurring. Molasses naturally ferments, producing carbon dioxide gas. The warmer temperature accelerated this process dramatically. Pressure was building. The substandard rivets were straining. The thin steel walls were bending. At approximately 12:30 p.m., as workers broke for lunch and children played in the streets, the tank began to groan. Witnesses reported hearing a sound like machine gun fire as rivets started popping. Then, with a roar that could be heard miles away, the entire structure exploded. The physics of what happened next are genuinely terrifying. 2.3 million gallons of molasses, weighing over 13,000 tons, were suddenly released from containment. The initial wave was 25 feet high and moved at an estimated 35 miles per hour. Molasses is not like water. It's dense, it's sticky, and it's devastatingly heavy. The wave hit with the force of a freight train, but instead of knocking you down and moving on, it trapped you, suffocated you, and drowned you in thick brown sludge. The first victims never had a chance. The wave struck a firehouse, trapping firefighters inside as the building collapsed. It demolished several homes, tearing them from their foundations. It lifted a truck and threw it into Boston Harbor. It knocked an elevated railway support structure off its base, nearly causing a train to derail. And everywhere it went, it trapped people. The scene was apocalyptic. Survivors described a brown nightmare where screams were muffled by the thick syrup filling mouths and noses. People were glued to the ground, unable to move as the molasses hardened around them. Horses were trapped, struggling and drowning in the sticky mass. Rescue workers arriving at the scene found themselves immediately stuck, unable to reach victims they could hear screaming just feet away. The molasses was waist-deep in some areas, and every step was a battle. When rescuers tried to pull people out, the molasses wouldn't let go. The suction was so strong that trying to free someone could dislocate their limbs. Antonio D'Estasio, a 10-year-old boy, was found hours later, still alive but trapped in the hardening syrup. His sister Maria wasn't so lucky. She was found days later, one of the 21 confirmed dead. The death toll could have been much higher. The disaster occurred during lunch hour when many workers were away from their desks. The nearby paving department building was destroyed, but most workers had left for lunch. Still, the victims who did die suffered horrific deaths. There was Bridget Clouherty, a homemaker in her 60s, trapped in her kitchen as her home was demolished around her. George Leahy, a teamster, was crushed along with his horse. Pasquale Iantosca, a 10-year-old boy who had been collecting firewood, was never seen alive again. The two youngest victims were brothers, Flaminio and Pasquale Iantosca, aged 10 and 4. Drowning in molasses is suffocation, but worse. The thickness prevents you from breathing, but you remain conscious longer than you would in water, aware of your fate as the sweetness fills your lungs. The cleanup took weeks. The Boston harbor was brown for months. Rescue workers used salt water to try to dissolve the molasses, but this only created a sticky brine that coated everything it touched. The entire north end became a brown, sticky mess. Molasses was tracked throughout the city by workers' boots, on subway trains, into homes and offices. Phone booths were sticky. Doorknobs were sticky. Everything was sticky. They used sand. They used water from fire hoses. They used saws to cut people free from hardened patches. The Navy sent 116 sailors to help with cleanup. It took over 87,000 man-hours to clean the affected area. And even then, residents claimed that for decades afterward, on hot summer days, you could still smell molasses in the North End. The legal aftermath was equally groundbreaking. Over 119 lawsuits were filed against the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, the parent company of Purity Distilling. The case took 6 years to resolve and became one of the first major class action lawsuits in Massachusetts history. The company initially tried to blame anarchists, claiming the tank had been bombed. This theory fell apart quickly. The investigation revealed the truth: corporate negligence, cost-cutting, and willful ignorance of safety concerns. The company had ignored engineer reports, dismissed complaints from residents, and prioritized profit over human life. In 1925, the court ruled against the company, awarding victims' families the equivalent of about $6 million in today's money. It wasn't enough, but it set a legal precedent that companies could be held liable for industrial disasters caused by negligence. So what can we learn from the day Boston drowned in molasses? First, that industrial disasters are often not accidents, but the inevitable result of cutting corners and ignoring warning signs. That tank leaked from day one. People complained. Nothing was done. Second, that bizarre disasters are still deadly disasters. The absurdity of drowning in molasses doesn't make the deaths any less tragic or the suffering any less real. And third, that justice delayed is still necessary. The 6-year legal battle established that corporations cannot simply walk away from the consequences of their negligence. Every safety regulation we have today exists because of disasters like this one. Every building code, every inspection requirement, every accountability measure was written in someone's blood, or in this case, someone's molasses. The Great Molasses Flood sounds like a joke until you understand it was a massacre, a preventable tragedy that killed 21 people because someone decided that profit mattered more than safety. The sweetest substance on earth became Boston's deadliest weapon, and the lesson it taught us is one we're still struggling to learn. Your negligence is not an accident, and someone will always pay the price.